we still really don't know what this is. This feels like a lore and logistics episode as we planned it. So this is an episode of lore and logistics because it's where the future comes to join with the past. I'm Brandon Buchanan. This is Alyssa Vieira. Dude, how's it going? You survived every time that you come on this show. You've just left Niall and Marcus, so I look good by comparison. What's going on with those folks? They're always bickering over something that means extremely nothing. Like it's
shallow and pedantic.
It's the shallow and pedantic hour with Niall and Marcus, where they were just having this long discussion and debate about like why Bernie lost. You gave your whole breakdown of that, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it was
You didn't get to talk on the last one, so I figure we'll let you talk on this one.
Give me 2 seconds though. My kid's yelling at me, so I'm at the worst.
All right, I will talk. Ta-da! They can't still be going. Hard stuff getter. They can't still be going, dog. But this is the internet. This is Twitter. This is the discourse. So I know for a fact that they are. Look, what they were talking about, if you were watching that, it's like the pregame to the main event of the evening, is actually really important because you can't really think about prescriptive solutions until you understand what did not work. If you know for sure, if you can agree on what's wrong, you can generally like come together on figuring how to fix it. But figuring out what's wrong and what went wrong and why is important. Like it's an important conversation to have. And personally, yeah, I kind of side with Niall. You know, Marcus was on here talking about we've all just got to be united. And look, Niall was right when he said like the reason that we're not united is because there's people that invest money in us not having unity. Like there's people that invest in division as a tool for getting their way politically or for making some dough or for like a dozen different reasons. We can't just all get on a Zoom call and be like, we're going to be united. And then we stay united for 4 years. And as we talk today about like the People's Convention and the People's Party, it's important that we start thinking about what are those friction points, because in the same way that division was used in the Democratic Party, division occurs in the Green Party. Look into what the Green Party actually does and is like. It's like lots of petty bickering. It's lots of infighting. Like it's lots of childlike shit. If you look at literally any left-wing organization, the DSA, if you look at the PSL, if you look at the ISO, if you look at the IWW, like the history of left-wing parties is a history of like ridiculous infighting over dumb shit. Good example. We had, and we're gonna come back to the People's Convention, but just as they've started today, there's already argument about like, should gun control be in the platform of the People's Party? Should they be a pro-gun left-wing party? Or should they be an anti-gun left-wing party? Does this party denounce capitalism enough? And of course, whenever you do anything left-wing, there's a discussion of like, are there people who are too fringe? Like, is Nico House too weird to be in the People's Convention? Is Jimmy Dore too much of a conspiracy theory person to be in the People's Convention? So that's just something that's going to exist no matter what, right? I mean, it's just a fact. Do you want me to? I can continue, but that division, that division continues as a tool. So, how do we fight that division? Well, it's having your own message, your own platform, your own media. And when we talk about like, if you don't have your own media platform, you're not going to be able to communicate with people. Like, yeah, I mean, can we have like a code of conduct and stuff like that? I mean, yes, and that helps. But like you're also going to deal with wreckers and people who are going to like make bad faith arguments and just generally behave in a scummy way if they're not getting their way. Um, so there's no, it helps, but it doesn't always fix everything. And yeah, I think one of the big things that got in the way was we don't have the means to communicate with people over the age of 40, 45. Like that doesn't exist on the left right now. And we can't, unless we have a podcast and the number one messages go back to Facebook. I don't know how to have those conversations. Uh, I don't know. So,
Well,
what do you think is the number one? I guess you can comment on the media and who we're reaching, because you did a lot of canvassing and you talked to people from a variety of age groups. And what do we need right now?
I mean, first and foremost, I think that it's so oh, try to be is here. Sorry. I'm so excited to see some of the people in the comments. Like AIC, y'all, so excited. I love you guys so much. But I think I think this is an important thing where, like I was kind of saying earlier, which is that we have to understand that if we're going to build a successful movement, in my opinion, it cannot be based on assimilation. It cannot be based on on an idea where you have to accept my ideas and I have to accept your ideas. It has to be something that's an integration. Let's talk about successful relationships, for example. People talk about how it's given its take, and you have to be willing to, make some compromises. Like, am I willing to make a compromise on Medicare for all? Absolutely not. But when it comes to the people, not the policies, it's so important. One second, you guys, I got a baby. I made a baby, and she's
So
not a baby.
it's all good. This is literally what I'm here for. And if you're a fan of Alyssa, you got to understand, literally, my role on this show is just to talk while she like straightens out her kid's tablet and shit like that. But yes, it is true that you've got to have a certain amount of wiggle room. Unfortunately, who's infamous for not having any wiggle room ever? Fucking leftists. So I hope that they do well, because we talked about, and in fact, we'll probably talk about the People's Convention after the break. We're having breaks now. But one of the things that like we've got to think about in terms of what do we need to do, it's amplifying like our message and getting that message to the right places. And yeah, sometimes that means bending a little bit ideologically, or maybe not bending so much as letting there be room to disagree. And letting there be places where everybody doesn't feel the same way, especially if you're trying to start either a political party or a political movement that doesn't run candidates but is a moral movement for policy. Every place is not going to be the same. Like, let's say you're starting a national party. First of all, if you're able to run locally, like you're probably going to have to start with running locally. As someone who's like had some interactions with the Green Party, and they have those discussions, and they're like, we can't get on a lot of ballots unless we have a certain percentage for the presidential election. And it's harder to run those local candidates unless we can gather 1 million signatures, and half of them get crossed out by some judge who's in a district or, whatever. Alyssa, what's your status?
I'm good. We're back.
Okay.
I mean, as much as I'm ever back and good. But I think this is where we talk about. I think a really good example of this is goodness, I won't remember what medal it is, but one of the strongest metals is forged. Oh my God, that's my favorite term, and I hope you're referring to me. I love the idea of being called the Praxis Fairy. But I started this group on campus called Class War Fairies. And like, to be honest with you guys, we got laughed out of things. Here you go, baby. But hey, Kaime, Punka Pie, you gotta just you cannot touch anything because it's really delicate because the screen's broken. So when I press play, just like carry it like this, like that. Okay, perfect. Okay, sorry. Hello, everyone. So, as I was saying, this is kind of one of those integral parts of, I think, the left and what's so great about it, which is the conviction that we all hold within ourselves, but which can also be misconstrued and our downfall, in so much as that we have a tendency to want to be so rigid in our beliefs because we've taken so much time to get there that it is really hard to concede some stuff. Now, parenting is a really good example of this because, I feel like, especially for young parents, if you're a young parent and for the first time in your life, you are going to be, uh, you have something that you care about deeply with all of your heart, and you have to do it with somebody else, right? So if you're co-parenting with somebody, especially if you guys aren't on the up and up anymore, it's really hard to concede something. You might really, really strongly believe in something, and then the other parent doesn't agree with you. And then it's really hard not to get into this fight because you both care so much about this child that it's so hard to have any idea that anything else would happen. Here you go, Punka Pie. Oh, anyways, I think this is where it's one of those things where, like, politics is so easily removed from our daily lives, where
Right.
to the point of where we feel like it's okay to treat things differently. But I feel like, sometimes both sides lose the concept that we are all people. A troll is a person. Whether or not they're a good person is arguable to some. But
I also think one of the things that makes it hard is just that the things that we are arguing about are a lot closer to our financial needs. They're a lot closer to our emotional needs. They're a lot closer to our spiritual needs. Uh, and we're a lot more desperate. So these policy issues that maybe a more conservative or liberal group can kind of paper over, liberals often look at these policy details and are dismissive of them. And they get to be dismissive of them because, like, once you have a certain amount of cash, you know for a fact that you are not going to have to worry about your survival. You are not going to have to worry about your family's survival. The difference between one policy and another is really an aesthetic difference. And because of that, they're willing to treat it like an aesthetic difference. Do you see what I'm saying? Do you see what I'm trying to get at here? So we have to move beyond the realm of aesthetic difference on the left. And sometimes that causes us to clash in a way that is more substantial than maybe it otherwise should be, especially because when you're on a political outgroup, it does make it more open to people who are charismatic but don't have the people's interest in mind. It leaves more opening to people who are like sex pests and creeps and predators. And obviously, that exists in every organization that exists in the world, whether that's a Fortune 500 company, whether that is a major political party, Democrats or Republicans, whether that's Hollywood, Wall Street. That dynamic of power and its abuse exists. But I think it's maybe equally or maybe more likely to exist in smaller spaces because they tend to be like cults of personality. They tend to be driven by one person or one woman's ideas. So it's really important that we are able to think about our ability to build in a big way, especially if we think that's our number one reason for losing. There's a lot of people, and I guess their views will not be represented on this show, that would have been like, well, the reason why Bernie didn't get that extra 20% is because there was a 20% of Americans that just wanted Bernie to go harder in the paint, and that's not really reflected by polling. One of the things that's kind of been underrated is people liked Bernie Sanders, and he survived a really intense campaign of personality warfare against him. The thing that stuck was just the fear of, is this person the right person? Is this person serious enough? Is this person willing to make compromises? And basically, the fear that comes with living in this system was weaponized against a lot of older people who have had hope and seen disappointment, and we have to kind of wrestle with that as well. The electability BS, and we've got to, and unfortunately, we're leaving Bernie Sanders, right? So we're entering an era where we're going to have to make a choice between either, are we going to shove a hand up somebody's ass, let's be theoretical, like a Jay Inslee or a Ed Markey, and just be like, yeah, we know you actually don't have super progressive bona fides, but we think you'll generally do what you are told. And if that's the case, maybe that's one route we take. The other route may be that we get an activist. And when I say we, I really mean the nurses, the postal workers, organized labor, the Sunrise Movement, a handful of activists. I feel like if there's signals from those groups, that people will kind of support those groups. But either way, will that be just somebody who's an activist and we all trust that person? Would I consider Warren a progressive? It depends on what we're talking about. If we're talking about the Democratic Party's treatment of progressives, they're pretty much hostile to Warren as much as they are hostile to Sanders. So when I have that discussion, I consider Warren a progressive. If I'm having a discussion about the important things, like the dismantling of capitalism, white supremacy, and militarism abroad, then no, I don't put Elizabeth Warren in that group. Do I like Cory? But yeah, I mean, she's cool. Yeah. Yeah, she's rad. Listen, we're going to come back. We're going to talk about the People's Party convention and our positives and our negatives. Hopefully Alyssa will be back by then. We'll see. We'll see what's happening. But yeah, we'll be right back, and stay tuned. Hey, what's up? We're back, and I want to talk a little bit about the People's Party convention. We cannot be canceling everybody. Yeah, I'll take time. I'll read some comments. What the hell? We can't be canceling everybody, IMO, but we also cannot settle for Biden. Listen, I mean, there are a handful of people who are biting the bullet on the Joe Biden thing, and look, it's a bummer that we're in a situation in American politics where we are facing catastrophic climate change, right? We're facing foreign adventurism. We're facing we assassinated an Iranian general and almost started World War III. I know that seems like a long time ago, y'all, but that was 9 months ago. It wasn't even a whole year ago. We're facing coronavirus, right? We're facing COVID. We're facing police brutality. We're facing economic equality. We're facing a healthcare crisis that's responsible for the loss of lives of literally tens of thousands of people every year. So it sucks that we're going into all that. And Joe Biden, became the major party nominee because the Democratic Party like got together and was like, this should be the guy. This is our best available option. And it also sucks that Biden has run a campaign completely based on like massaging, giving foot massages to Republican boomers instead of like embracing real basic common sense stuff that the vast majority of people would be into and would support. But like, it kind of bums me out because when we talk about left-wing organizers who are talking about supporting Biden, like if you are a person that's a quote real unquote activist, Joe Biden is going to be brutalizing your friends in much the same way Donald Trump is. And unfortunately, like the libs that you are sucking up to so hard, like that you are trying to get in with and build coalitions with, are going to tune out. They're out of the building as soon as Biden checks into the White House. On that January 22nd, all those people are going back to fucking brunch. That is a fact of life. And we know this not because we are conspiracy theorists, not because I have a crystal ball and can look into the souls of people. That's because I was alive during the Obama administration. And I know that when there were outrages during that administration, it was seen as like, this has to be done. Like, this is what we must do. And so it's rational. It's fine. And we saw that at Occupy Wall Street, these people that nominally supported Occupy and were like, oh, it seems fine. They didn't do a lot of like fear baiting over like rioters and aggression. They thought of it as a strange curiosity. And yeah, when things got violent at Occupy, these people just kind of turned their head. When we looked at ICE camps, detention camps, captain deportation, the most deportations of any U.S. president, and it was just silence. It was just looking away. And I feel like in 2020, if we're dealing with a Biden administration, we may have an effect that is much worse than people just merely turning their heads to the side and looking away. I think that in the same way that this toxicity has existed in like the resistance libs, I kind of think that will continue. But and I see this hard stuff getter kind of tuning in. Joe Biden will crush the leftist uprising. Standing Rock will look like a picnic. What I will say is, and this is something that we can have hope in, we don't know for sure how people will react to that. And I do believe that Biden will get physical with protesters. Do we know for sure that people will be loyal to Biden? Are we sure that he is liked in the same way that Obama was liked? Are we sure that there is enthusiasm for Biden in the same way there was enthusiasm to cover for Obama? Is there a group of people that go, oh man, we just have to suck it up for Biden? Yes, there are like the K-Hive. There is like the 8%ers, but look, they are 8% of the party. They are not going to be reflected in what really happens outside of Twitter. Whereas like these marches are big outside of Twitter, even if they're not getting a lot of positive media coverage. The same banks that the senator from MBNA is beholden to are invested in fossil fuels. They are invested in the military industrial complex. They are invested in the prison industrial complex. And look, that is just facts. That is just true. And it's part of one of the reasons why he's had trouble getting that enthusiasm from people who are under the age of like 40, because there's just a hard gap in what are the needs of, I'm using young people very liberally, but like people who aren't senior citizens, working people, although obviously there are many seniors that work, but let's say for the purposes of this conversation, working people in America who are not living off their savings and are not living off their dividends. What they need is political policy that's free of corporate influence. What they need is political policy that's free of their donors and free of the donor class. But unfortunately, they've got a political party that is completely beholden to that donor class, and that sucks. were resistance libs as toxic before? They seem worse. Maybe it's more aware. They're more threatened. I mean, they were getting dunked on all spring. They were getting brutalized on Twitter, and they're battle hardened, just like a lot of these toxic Bernie bros are battle hardened. So they're just used to behaving in that way. That's just what's happening. Um, yeah, let's talk about the People's Party. We were supposed to be waiting on Alyssa, but we won't. We're going to take 30 seconds. I'm going to come back. I'm going to talk about the People's Convention highs. I also have some criticisms, and they're probably criticisms we all agree with, and you might not have thought of yet. It's just stuff that's whack, and it's stuff that needs to be pointed out. Kind of pissed off. We'll talk about it in 30 seconds. We'll be right back. People's Convention. Let's talk about it. Very. So, on one hand, this is not a lot, right? All that these guys did was for 4 hours or so. All they did was put on a Zoom call. They literally got everybody in the room. They swapped the cameras from one person to another. They clicked a few buttons. They ran a couple of chyrons. They got a banner at the bottom. And like that was their political convention. There was no creative framing. There was no big budget. But this was a Zoom call, and it was more than the Green Party has run. The Green Party, and I say this as someone who, who is okay with the Green Party and has worked with the Green Party before. I got to be real. To be real, they're not a group that can run a Zoom call properly. Like, that's a level that's like beneath our podcast, dude. Like, Alyssa, you're here at just the right time.
Beautiful.
I wanted to talk about the People's Convention today.
Okay. The People's Convention.
Yeah, the movement for People's Party, whatever they're calling themselves. It's a Zoom call. Like nothing, like Alyssa, you are somebody who's familiar with actual party building. What we've seen from the People's Party is social media posts, tweets, basically, some in-person actions. They went to a bunch of politicians' houses like last month with like petitions for like UBI and all that other good stuff. And a Zoom call. So basically, this is like the repertoire of a podcast.
Don't shit on me like that.
Well, yeah. I mean, a very nice podcast. I don't mean that in a way to be mean to them. I'm just saying that this is like the bar is a low bar. And unfortunately, many groups inside the United States have not passed this low bar of being competent on social media and competent in the digital age at all. It doesn't exist.
Right. Well, so here's my thing. I also have to be, again, for anybody that didn't already hear me say this, I 1,000% did not watch the whole thing. I was kind of engaging with some of the smaller shows and people that I love and adore that I didn't see. That I like to pump up, and I find that usually if I'm engaged in those shows, some of the other people will be. Here, bring it to me, Pumpkin. So what I like to think about the People's Party is you can stay here, Pumpkin Pie. There is a very true and very real thing to be said for all of those people who were speaking. I think not all of them necessarily, but a lot of them, right? Like we all know Nina Turner, like she's not messing around and hasn't been, and so I am a Nina Turner stan, and I stan that, but I think there's something to be said for that. Hold on 2 seconds. I'm so sorry, you guys. I'm the worst parent and person. Okay.
Alyssa, you're doing great as a mom. As a podcast host, you're also doing great. Most of the people here in this chat room are here to see you, so you're doing fine. Yeah, let me talk about this. Was it a grab for email addresses, and a grab for email addresses, a grab for apps? Do you guys? Yes. I mean, number one, yeah, they're gonna ask you for money. Do you know how hard it is? Like, I feel like everybody was like hip hip hooray for the Zoom call, and they were not hip hip hooray for the amount of money and volunteering that will be asked of y'all. To like, did that Zoom call pump you up enough to go knock doors for the next 2 years? Because like that's what we're talking about. Like that is the actual work of building a political party. And Nina will not be doing that. Like I don't think Nina and Dr. West will be going from door to door collecting signatures and petitions to like run for a city council seat in Poughkeepsie or whatever these first, slots are. That's going to be a pain. So yeah, they're trying to fundraise. Yeah, obviously. All of this is built around like they need to raise money, and their hope is that they can raise like a Bernie Sanders amount of money from people. But I think that there's a lot of people who see the presidential politics as like their way out. And I think Bernie's number one like hurdle that Bernie had to cross in order to be treated realistically was, and what we talk about last segment, being treated seriously, being treated as a real contender, being treated as someone who can win. Are you going to ask working people who are barely making ends meet right now that the most important thing that they can do with their money at a time like this, post-corona, during riots, during police brutality, is to donate to your third party with no elected officials, with no presidential candidate, with like a Zoom call featuring Nick, like that. I think that y'all might be that. Yeah, I'm looking at what y'all are saying. Yeah, that might be a tall order, and it might be a taller order than Bernie Sanders, who like is the most popular politician in the United States of America. If y'all thought that, right, if y'all thought that was hard, and by politician I mean active, I mean like on the scene now. I know by post-corona, I mean it's happened. Like all that Bernie fundraising, the virus was not like ravaging America in the way. Like by the time that the coronavirus really started dominating, like Bernie was on the way out. So we're talking like in the midst of a pandemic, are we donating to start an alternative to the Green Party? Which really, like to be cynical, we're running. All of this is to replace the Green Party, not the Democratic Party.
Yeah, well, and that's kind of my beef, if we're being frank.
Let's have the all be franks. Let's do it.
That tickled my fancy. I like that. But yeah, I think, and it's hard too, because I phone banked for more politicians than I could probably name in a minute, canvassed for them, and I was texting and all of those things. I said texting like this because I did it from my computer, because most of the time I have wrist braces on when I'm not on live stream because I've got arthritis and carpal tunnel. But what?
Too much posting. You've got posters wrists. That's what you've got.
I had it beforehand though. I love you. Why don't you try reading a book, okay? Okay, but you can turn on a light. I'm so sorry. I don't know what's wrong. I love you. Can you shut that for me? I'll be right there. I love you. You're the best. So, I don't know how to use this iPad. I don't know how to do anything anyway. Kylie Mae, it's fixed. But so like this is something what I was trying to build up with on that. Just be really careful with it. Is that it's hard for me because I've gotten a lot of fundraising texts right now and recently that make it so that I can't make
Do
it
you
so
do,
that
do you need me to MC for a moment? Do you got it?
potentially, but we're gonna be wild because I know most of the people in this group, and I'm just gonna bring y'all with me.
Let's
Um,
see how this is going. All right, this is
so
exciting.
so
HD Alyssa in full screen.
I'm not a potato, and here's my Kylie Mayo.
Hey,
Oh, good. Oh, I'm sorry I ate your whole mouth and nose. Okay, you doing good? She thought that was funny, so we're doing good. You want to say hi, Kylie? Hi. Okay. So, if you need anything, come get me, but try not to move it because it's just really delicate, okay? Promise we'll get you a new computer, okay? Okay. And as soon as mom's other computer's done updating, I'll give you that one. So, uh, I was saying something that is super important. Remember that.
yeah, you're talking about pandemic fundraising. That you get a
Oh,
lot of messages and shit from people asking
right.
you for money right now.
I do. And here's the other kicker for me is I get that in my DMs a lot because I've gotten to this point where, I have a little bit of a bigger account now. And so people very often will hit me up for money and I'm like, whoa, 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 whoa. Please and I want to make this abundantly clear. Please continue to hit me up because I will amplify as much as I can. That said, sometimes people think that like I'm in a fiscal position to help and I'm like,
You have
oh,
you have like 12K on Twitter. That's not a huge amount.
it's
Like
not.
it's not like you have bylines in various outlets. It's not like you have a vlog. You are a shit poster with a vlog, Alyssa. It's not.
But
Yeah.
here's the thing is actually I didn't start doing videos until after I think I had hit, I want to say over 3,000. And most of it was just documenting what I was doing on the campaign trail.
Right.
And then, so what's, again, I've said this multiple times on multiple shows, what's so great about, in my opinion, what's so great about, oh my God, sorry, I'm cracking up at the comments right now. Brandon, you're full of white privilege. Do you know that?
I know. I'm working on it. I'm working on purifying myself day to day. But listen, go ahead.
So, uh, what's crazy to me is just all of these people are for the most part people who I've worked with in some capacity or I know through somebody else, and so they're really an active fan base. And I have differing opinions on a lot of them. That's why I respect them. I feel like, what's so cool about these platforms that we do have, that we have built from all this organizing is like, we've made comrades. Now, yeah, there's some who have snuck in there who are like absolute fucking
Dipshits.
morons. Exactly. But on the other end of it, on the other hand of, oh my God, on the other hand of things, I have found that it like my comrades online have been such good uh, comrades and people in general on average. And so this is where I'm like, I struggle with this whole people's party thing because on one hand, well, two things. A, it's so nice to see the timeline filled with hope and positivity, and I do think that that's something that can get us a very, very far. Um, and I really like that. The other thing is I do think it's important to build parties and movements through people who are willing to be engaged and active, and I think that's kind of shifting and changing as we go through corona and covid and
Right.
all these things.
Yeah, being able to run a Zoom call is pretty important during a pandemic. I know I've
Man,
touched on
damn
that as a point, but
right. And I think we're having to adapt, but I also think that we're inundated right now with this idea, and we have been for a long time, as far as this motherfucker. You better watch out. Oh my God. Anyways, I do think that we've been inundated with this idea that social media is a bad horrible thing. And I think that there's something to do with it. Like in my psychology classes, every professor I've ever had in a psychology class has always talked about how horrible social media is for people and the brain. But I'm also like, I think it's a new frontier. Oh my God.
All
Okay.
right. That's cool. Listen, I wanna add something to your
Yeah.
speech about social media. We had speakers, and some of those speakers did things that are going to go viral and they're going to have pull on social media. And then there's Nick, who I'm not being mean to Nick, but Nick was the MC for the convention and introduced every speaker and gave the opening speech and gave a keynote that was 20 minutes long. So that we've got to break that up. Like that guy is not going to be the face of the revolution or whatever. Like if we're trying to reach new groups of people who are not engaged with politics, you really got to dig deep and find someone who's maybe a little bit of a better presenter than that. But there's also something that Eric raised. Well, do you have any thought? Like, who would you like to be a spokesman aside from Nina and Doctor? Is there somebody who you feel was missing? And then I'll move on to this last part of this discussion.
I would have liked to see a few more people. And again, I have to be frank. I feel like I'm almost like not allowed to comment on this because I didn't watch it all the way through. But I would have liked to see, from what I can tell, more solidified extremists. And I know that's a horrible word to use right now.
But you're right. Well, not that you're wrong or right, but I did notice that that it's not the rhetoric was the left wing of the Democratic Party more than it was a socialist party or a Green Party. Like it was maybe slightly to the right of the Green Party. Maybe that's okay because the Green Party has been the Green Party and has sucked. And maybe there's just a group of people that like maybe it's a moral, maybe it's like I've seen Green Party conventions and I've seen Green Party debates and panels, and it does get very out there. Like you are in the space age with some of the Green Party people. So maybe it's fine if it's a little more of a normified moral Monday type like healthcare kind of deal. That's fine. Reparations also not mentioned at all. The word not mentioned.
Like the word, which is like, I mean, was there one Latinx person? I mean, I that's another good point. Somebody's gonna put on
there
their
were
personal
like two, and Nick himself is a Latinx person.
Okay, and I want to tell. I want to do something in a few minutes, and maybe we'll have to do this after the break. But I do want to address some of the comments at some point because there's a couple in here that I have some good responses on that I'd really like to help. Like for me being doxxed. But so I feel like before we get into that and before I jump down that rabbit hole, I do have a couple.
Don't spend time. No, we actually have a really tight agenda, so we don't really have time to like yell at MAGA weirdos.
Okay, can I just give them the address to send my hate mail to really quick?
Actually, you can't.
All right. All right.
I want to talk about money.
That's fine.
Where does a political party's got to raise money? A political person's got to raise money. Literally everything relies on money. Eric Fernandez says, I think the main thing missing is building money engines whose excess labor value goes to paying people to organize and canvas. Fundraising just milks your own people and leaves them in their shitty jobs. We need jobs that build the movement. And these are money engines that are high profit businesses whose profits go to the movement, run by vetted, ethical people who are recallable by the membership. this sounds like you're describing the Promised Land, which is a game Adriel Hampton and company are working on. It's like a farming MMO that's going to have a bunch of micro transactions for outfits and houses and barns and stuff like that. And you pay $1 here and $1 there, and it adds up. But first of all, where does the money come from?
Right. Well, and I think that's kind of where I get stuck, because I get to this point where I'm like, if I'm being entirely honest if I'm being just entirely honest, I would like to see a future that I think would be mentally healthy for people, which is where we're not basing every single fucking aspect of our society on productivity and how much fiscal gain we're getting. So now let me give some qualifiers to this, which is that I'm not saying I'm definitely not saying like lower the pay. We should absolutely be increasing minimum wages. We should be doing all of these things to help with fiscal well-being. But in the long run and in the long term, I feel like a lot of people forget that there have been full-fledged, well-functioning societies, whether we talk about them or not, in some capacity or another, that have been able to survive off of indirect reciprocity. And maybe not society, maybe community is a better word. But this does become a lot more tricky in a pandemic. My child is yelling at me, so Brandon, I'm gonna give you the floor for a minute and I'll be right back.
Fundraising becomes tricky in a pandemic, and unfortunately, when you start talking about like how to raise money, we're now entering the wrecker zone, because you've already, you've decided that you're not going to have, corporate PACs or whatever. I assume that they're rejecting PACs altogether, although I'm not sure about that. Who are we campaigning towards? And unfortunately, when we say like, hey, the money comes from the people, if you're running a professional operation, can be different groups. And if your donor base is older and more affluent, that's going to reflect in your policy. If your voter base is more strident, that's going to reflect in your policy, right? If your party is more of an id poll kind of deal, that will be reflected as well. So your political party is going to follow the money, and that's going to create problems. Like if a single person is the number one fundraiser for your party, then they are going to, especially for a fledgling party, they are going to have like an outsized amount of political influence, even if they are denouncing the poisonous influence of money on politics and all that good stuff. That is just like a fact of human interaction, y'all. That's just like how it's going to be. Campaigns do need money though, and they need time. And again, we've seen a lot of Bernie spinoff groups in the last 4 years rather. None of them have been Bernie. We've seen AOC do well, but again, this is somebody who was running for an elected office and broke a lot of those records after they held an elected office. Unions are so tied into Democratic establishment, that would be an obvious revenue stream. Yeah, but do we know that labor, because listen, I heard a lot of stuff about healthcare in this convention. Didn't hear, like, I heard about a guy who was at like the post office. Didn't hear like, hey, organized labor is now backing this, obviously, like it's now backing this political party. Yeah, AOC has her own PAC now. I don't freak out about PACs really, but yeah, she does have one. And how else does she get the money from herself to the grassroots candidates? So what if we let the workers loan the money at low interest, like when they get their tax returns? That money is returned in excess labor value. Yeah, people could do that if they trusted the people in charge. They will be called grifters at every possible twist and turn, though, so you got to be prepared for that. No, I know, not faulting her, but yeah, also that is just a fact that it costs money to do it. So we're going to take one more break, and this will be our last break for the night. And we'll come back and we'll cover a little bit more. So stay tuned. Yeah, I can talk a little bit about the People's Party before we move on. Labor has to central pitch in. I agree. I mean, we've got this gap between Zoom calls and like mass action, right? And generally, when we talk about mass action, what do you need if you're somebody that's running for local office? You need to know the people at your church. Like, you need to know people at your job. You need to like know 10 to 12 people that are physically prepared to drop everything for you for 6 months and make calls for like a couple hours a day. And like, do you know people that are willing to do that? And one of the reasons why the Democratic Party is so powerful institutionally is because it's people who have done that for generations. And they know the people who have done that for generations. And they got a mailing list of people who do that for generations. You're talking about like building a list of people who are interested in a major American third party, and they don't own, like, the People's Party doesn't own any data of the voters. They don't own voter van data. They've got to do all of that from scratch. Whereas if you're running on like the Democratic Party line, you can say, oh yeah, the corporate yada 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 yada. But you do have access to the data. Like, you have the ability to make the calls, you have the ability to send the mailers, and like get to that group of people. That's not nothing, right? It's Fred Hampton's day. We've got to remember Fred, and I think part of why we thought that these two things were related is because movement building, folks, is complicated. Movement building is super complicated. Political party building is super complicated. And what should you do? What are your values when you don't have access to a data list and you need to build organic connections with people? Well, the Black Panther Party had these issues. So Alyssa, let's talk for a little bit. How are you doing? Sheila.
I'm managing.
That's pretty fair.
I'm managing.
I'm
alive.
I want to talk about briefly Fred Hampton and the gap between an intellectual study and an intellectual assertion of values to having an authentic connection with your community. And this is something that can be applied to an election, but like, given the times, I also want us to think about things that are bigger than an election. So talk about that.
Excuse me. So, like, a little background for those of y'all who don't know, Fred Hampton was born. Sorry, I'm trying not to burp and y'all. Try not to burp in everybody's ear. But
it was today, right?
It was today, August 30th, 1948. So my grandma, who I am still like, so probably the closest member I am with, closest relationship I have with a member of my family is my grandma Patty, right? She was born in 1948. She's Kylie's great grandma. So I wanted to reiterate that in the fact that this brilliant, beautiful man died at age 21. And that is a horrible fucking thing. But in light of all of these, in light of all the things that's going on, I mean, for those of you who know me through Twitter, I feel like most people are familiar with my background. And my background is a quote and a picture of Fred Hampton. And I want to assert right off the bat that the reason that Fred Hampton was assassinated, which I'll get back to in a little bit, was absolutely because he was a Go ahead. No, go ahead, Brandon.
No, I mean you hit it. He was absolutely assassinated, and it was partially because he was seen as like an immediate. He was getting way too much popular support, and a lot of the media effects, like the playbook that was used against like leftist movements, did not stick in those neighborhoods because they were so disenfranchised. Like there
Yes.
was they had reached a point where there was no stick. Like the mainstream world didn't have any stick uh, in terms of the messaging that was given against those groups because they didn't have anything else. And we see
Totally.
that today. We see that today with lots of Black identitarian groups that do community service. Like people don't care if you have problematic views or whatever, and that exists on Twitter too. Like nobody's examining you for problematic views as much if you are doing something that they see as a good action, and that's
It's
important.
right. Well, and I feel it's a double-edged sword too. It's so important.
And
We have to.
because of that importance, it also leaves room for toxicity, right? Because if a human being will make the decision that they will ignore the bad things about you if they are getting a material benefit, then that means they're ignoring the bad things about you. That's not good either.
Right.
And there were obviously a lot of, we don't have to get into this, but there were a lot of flaws in the BPP, and there have been plenty of books written on the subject, and you can read one and they'll go into it. But given that,
Well, I mean,
uh,
like I think that's a good point. And I hate to say this right off the bat because I'm gonna say this about one of my other like people I really look up to who's involved in the
right,
Black Panther Party, but like Angela Davis, been largely silent and or ambiguous in general on average about a lot of things going on, and I think that does serve as something that can be disheartening for some. But back to our man Fred, who I absolutely adore, and I could watch videos of Mr. Fred Hampton for hours, and I think this is the very reason. What I was going to say, largely that had to do with his death, is not just what he was saying, but how he was saying it. He was such a multicultural activist who had charisma and was engaging and was able to be a united force that, again, we like I was saying earlier, it's not about assimilation, it's about, for lack of a better word, integration and acceptance. And so this idea that Fred Hampton had, I'm gonna start this off with one of my favorite quotes, which is my cover photo on my Twitter page. But we got to face some facts that the masses are poor, that the masses belong to what you call the lower class. And when I talk about the masses, I'm talking about the white masses, I'm talking about the black masses and the brown masses and the yellow masses too. We have to face the fact that some people say you fight fire best with fire. But we say you put fire out best with water. We say you don't fight racism with racism. We're going to fight racism with solidarity. We say you don't fight capitalism with no black capitalism. You fight capitalism with socialism. Now, I'm not here to make a pitch on socialism or communism or any of those things, but I think at the very kernel of this, you come to this realization that Fred Hampton was a force of unity. He was such a force of unity to be reckoned with that the United States of America literally developed an entire program around the idea of eradicating himself and others.
and
Now,
yeah, and that's a program that has been used to destabilize political movements across the globe, and especially in the United States, on both wings, but especially on the left.
yes, and it's something that we still face today. And I feel like it's disingenuous to try and point to it's disingenuous to try and say we've made so much progress when you look at how many people have participated in the kneecapping of different liberation
Well,
movements.
can you explain?
Probably
Because
not.
we're talking. Well, hold on. Let me get there. As we talk about like the kneecapping of left wing movements, what specifically, like when we talk about like what is the method of operation, so that maybe if somebody is they're in a movement that is to the left of Elizabeth Warren, and things are things are being goofy, things seem weird. How do I? Not even that they are a CIA agent doing COINTELPRO, but what are the tactics that they saw as the most destructive?
Well, so that's the, depending on how you want to put it, fun or horrific.
I
thing
call it
about it.
funerific.
Funerific. I love this. This is the circus of shit shows, and we're going to tell you some funerific facts.
Okay.
So, the funerific facts are that, unlike anything else in the United States government, for the first time they were able to include some diversity. Now, it was diversity of tactics, but it was diversity. I'll give them that. And so, I feel like, so what's so, sorry, my hair tie, I didn't bring any hair ties when I evacuated from the fire, and so I'm just like grabbing random strings everywhere and going from there. But so somebody's like, no COINTELPRO. I hope Hard Stuff Getter knows that I have to go into COINTELPRO, and I'm so sorry. But for those of you out there who aren't aware, type in COINTELPRO 101 plus
Well,
video.
here's the thing, Alyssa. Instead of having
Yes.
to type and read and learn, they're here to
Right.
listen to you talk about it. If you want me
So,
to do some COINTELPRO talk, I can. By the way,
I can't.
are you stalling for time? Do you got this?
No, I was. I mean, I was trying to find a specific page because I wanted to read something. Okay, here we go. So, I have this whole book is on liberation movements in the 1960s. Like that's all of this is just the 1960s. Like that's not even that's not even going from there. But I have this thing called Let Freedom Ring, a collection of documents from the movements to free US political prisoners, right? So one of the biggest things that I think we don't understand is that Fred Hampton and the people who he associated with and worked with are people who are either most likely dead and or are still in political prisons of some sorts.
Yeah.
And so there's still a lot of fucking pressure put on these people. But going back to the diversity of tactics that the CIA, the FBI and the CIA use, there's the physical brute force of the busting into somebody's home and shooting up as many people that were in there as humanly possible, down to the infiltration and paying off of other folks. So like I can't remember the person's name, and I'll get back to everybody on this, but there was somebody, a very prominent member's sister married somebody, and it turns out that they were a fucking rat the whole time. There's so many narcs. And so it's what's really crazy to me though is that the COINTELPRO program, which illegally served to disrupt and destroy the Black liberation movement and many other unidentified or uncredited movements at that time that were progressive organizations, but it was a secret thing that wasn't exposed until 1975, right? So Fred Hampton died in 1969. He was assassinated. He didn't just die natural causes. 21 years old, shot and killed in his home. One other person was shot and killed. Many other were injured. And when we talk about this, like many people will recognize COINTELPRO written, like they'll see it and they'll be like, "Oh, I know that means something."
Yeah, but what is it, Alyssa?
But what is it? It is an absolutely illegal program that was put into place by intelligence agencies in the United States whose sole purpose was to disrupt and destroy any movements of liberation. Now we're talking it's AIM, American Indian Liberation Movement. We're talking the Brown Berets. We're talking all types of things. So what was really cool about Fred Hampton, and what I love about this, is Fred Hampton worked with Jose Cha from the Young Lords, and I can't remember the other person's names, but from a couple different movements. And what they did was they worked together to create this thing called the Rainbow Coalition, which has now later been co-opted by Jesse Jackson. Like, it's co-opted. But at that time, the Rainbow Liberation was a movement by people on the streets, for the streets, to the streets, where they worked to engage in all different forms of liberation through means of solidarity. And what COINTELPRO did, and what they recognized, Leonard Peltier, there it is. What they did, let me rephrase this.
There was a list of tactics that were basically weaponized, and basically using the idea of deliberation and democracy in order to kneecap whatever was going on. So they had like a list of rules, like for their ops. You know how Jordan Peterson has rules for life. They had rules for ops, and many of these tactics, intentionally or unintentionally, the choice is yours, are used now in any left-wing movement, which is there's always somebody that never wants to actually do anything. They want to have like a 35-point debate. You will also find vague denunciations of any action that is taken on an extremely minute detail, and demand that there is a pause to reflect, a demand that there is a further deliberation, or that there is a vague voice that isn't being heard. There will be voices are not being heard properly about this issue. So because of that, we have to like stop what we're doing. There are also there's also work to find fragile coalitions that are in that group and kind of what do you call it? Split those groups off against each other. So you'll find that leadership is attacked for favoring one group in front of another. And you'll find that happening like all the time. Meetings, when there are meetings, everything gets delayed to the next meeting. If there's an argument, it's got to be dragged out. Just incredible amounts of stalling and delaying to make sure that whatever comes out of the mush is as tedious and ineffective as possible. Because obviously you don't want an organization to be effective to the point that it's making a tangible difference in people's lives. And by the way, like for y'all who don't know, the amount of like terrorism that was waged against these folks was like kind of obnoxious, kind of ridiculous, and kind of a lot. Like foods were poisoned. Like they literally like would poison food that was given as one, a way to demoralize people, and two, as a way to like put doubt in people's heads about the efficacy of the organization, because obviously someone who's inside and working as an op can say, well, look at this is why we shouldn't have done X, Y, and Z. Oh yeah, hard stuff getter, bringing up resolved issues from prior meetings. Oh, that's so interesting that you would say that. But yeah, that was also like a common tactic that was that was often used. Calling for, oh yeah, dude, you might have the list in front of you. Yes, calling for things to be resolved by subcommittees, common cointelpro tactic. We don't have the information to deal with this right now. We need to recruit a separate group that will investigate this issue, get all of the people who are affected on the same page, and make a decision, make a recommendation for a decision, and let's take that up. And if you can pass the subcommittee, you basically delayed any kind of action by a good month and a half. Yeah, complex voting regulations, hard stuff getter. You're really just naming them all, which I really appreciate, because I'm giving I'm giving my memories of COINTELPRO, because I don't have Alyssa's big book in front of me. Yeah. So we were just talking about like stretching. I just remember
Well,
it from back in the day. Yeah.
we can't all be that cool. Hard stuff getter.
So yeah, we were just talking about stretching and delay. And we're also talking about the Rainbow Coalition. So pick one of those. What excites you to
Um,
talk about?
I mean, I love the Rainbow Coalition, if we're being honest, because it reminds me a lot of one of our most favorite whitewashed activists that
I thought you were
everybody
going to say one of our favorite white activists, Tim
cites.
Robbins.
No, that's Mr. Robbins.
Oh, okay.
Oh, sorry. Is it Mr. Robin?
I
Singular.
don't know.
Anyways, I dropped the ball on that. I'm sorry, you guys. My comedy is not on point tonight.
It's very
But
late.
it's been a rough one. So the Rainbow Coalition, what I love about the Rainbow Coalition is that it was fundamentally very much a part of what I believe was going to be the Poor People's Campaign. What Dr. King had in his mind of this like multicultural, however you want to put it, but where it's like we have to take on those who are looking down on us and essentially oppressing us, and it's a way to unite. And also something that I love about it is it was where Fred Hampton, Jose Cha, God, I'm gonna fuck up the other person's name, but like them and a bunch of other people came together and were like, hey, we want to work to stop gang violence in our communities. We're gonna do these things. They were largely successful, and it's something that we see repeated in history again. Because yes, rise up angry and mothers and others. Hard stuff together. I need to have you come on a show with us. But there was so many different liberation movements that got kneecapped in different ways. And I feel like the more attention we pay to these things, the more we engage with the liberational knowledge that they had and their tactics. And then we
All right.
have to also go ahead.
What is the number one thing that was done as a tactic that you think was a genuine threat, and how can we defend from sabotage like actions in the next like 5 years? Two-part question. And
It
of
is.
course, it's the hardest possible question. So good luck.
Thank you. I very, very, very much believe in the concept of collective self-determination. And I know that's a it's a mouthful, but from the third world peoples to students for a democratic society. Exactly. It's all comes back down to not finding unity and assimilation, but solidarity, as Hard Stuff Getter is saying, which is, where we come back to this idea where it's like, I don't need to understand your specific struggle, but I can recognize it. And I can recognize that you are feeling harm in ways that may not be the exact same way as my harms, but that as one human to another human, I don't want to see you suffering. I don't want to see you oppressed. And how can we find some overlap? Like if we're all different Venn diagrams, like let's find the middle part, and that way of unity. And I think that's what was so important and is still so important about Fred Hampton, is that my friend Fred was able to identify these different things in all these groups and go, hey, look, we are better off together. It's like a way better version of Ants movie. So by identifying the different struggles, recognizing them as different and not saying, hey, your struggle needs to find a way to be the same as my struggle, but instead being like, I see your struggle. It doesn't need to be the same as my struggle, but let's work together. And instead of struggling against each other, let's turn it up to the people who are actually struggling with us. Yeah, exactly. We
That's gonna
build
be
bridges.
that's gonna be a hard, because here on Twitter, people are like, "Oh, if you like onions on your sandwiches, you are not my comrade." But anyway, it's going to
Just
be
don't know what comrade mean though.
right. Um, I say this all the time. Republicans and Democrats don't like each other, but they are comrades. That being said, we've
I
covered
love
a
that.
lot in an hour and 15 minutes.
Yeah.
There is more we could add. And Alyssa, I kind of want to revisit this same topic as soon as possible.
I really do too. I feel like I feel so bad for everybody because I just had so many things going on right now. And
Yeah,
as y'all know, I'm in a hotel that, that we're changing every night, trying to find the cheapest price.
whacking bad.
Right.
Yeah, let's get it together.
Bad.
But
Yeah.
we got here, we did it, and we're gonna make some clips. We're gonna do all kinds of stuff. Hell yeah. So
Hell yeah.
Alyssa,
Before we log off, I want to interrupt Brandon repeatedly. So I just did that 4 times. I'm going to do a 5th in a minute. But no, I did want to say that, Brandon and I are both trying to develop some other ideas because we've both had some serious talks about like what we think. Yeah, fuck Obama. Fuck Obama. But aside from
what
that,
are our serious talks? These comments are not good for your ADHD.
neither is a
too
lack
much.
of access to medical care.
These comments are just dangling in front of you like candy. Go ahead.
I wanted to tell the motherfucker Trump supporter in here. I was about to give him my address at the police department. But that's
This thing is already an hour and 15 minutes. So we can't, like, we've done episodes of Not Safe for Wonks where we spend like 20 minutes arguing with MAGA people, and we always regret it. Like, get your dunks in and move on, but don't derail the circus to go and corral one monkey. It's not worth it.
My little dunk on them, and then I'll move on, which is that they're like, I'm going to dox you. And I'm like, the 2 people on the show are literally using their full last names.
Yeah,
Like, point blank, period. That's it. Brandon Buchanan and Alyssa Vieira.
Yeah.
Thanks for doxing me. Okay.
Way to
so
go.
moving on. So there we go. We have to do some deep breathing and some mental health. But
Alyssa, we've been talking about things that we wanted to do in the future. This isn't Niall and Marcus. I'm not just going to be like, Alyssa's talking. I'm going to stare into space and wait for my turn to talk. I am listening to you go in circles and sound ridiculous. So we're talking about things that we've been considering doing in the future. And what were those things?
So we got a couple cool fucking things, I think. And the basis of all of this is that we want to be making sure that we're providing things that are helpful, useful to our community, and things that are educational and helpful that aren't just like the same shit talk show news things. Because, like, let's be fucking real.
Yeah,
nobody wants to hear more news.
Not Safe for Wonks does a live stream 5 times a week. And I would say a good 70% of what we do is complain about the news. Our friend Jesus Rubio is doing Popular Populist, which is just going to be interviews with just organizers that are in the city. Samer Hernandez is doing a weekly news wrap-up show. We've got a lot of news discussion. So we've got to think of something that's maybe we're talking about movies and political history. Maybe we're talking about we got to find a unique vibe.
A little niche. And I think where that niche is going to be is the overlap of contemporary and historical events and narratives, and the lore and the logistics behind them. And so I'm really excited about that. Another idea that I'm not going to get too deep into, but Brandon and I think are going to definitely be doing something that's like a drunk history, but where we're like, actually, y'all are wrong and you can't have that show. Oh,
right. So we'll come back to it. Everybody, an hour and 20 minutes. Everybody, thank you for watching.
Go donate to my GoFundMe.
It's been like 3 hours with Alyssa. If you're watching this, you're one of like the 9 or 10 people who are watching this at 4 a.m,
and you're not donating to this GoFundMe, get a grip. What is wrong with you? Fix it.
Unless you're poor and you're also evacuating, then my bad.
If you're poor, you should also donate like $10. But if you're evacuating, then you're okay. If you're literally evacuating, if you're on fire right now, don't. But otherwise, get in there.
And by evacuating, we don't mean on the bathroom. But, sorry. And 1:26 a.m. See, that's where I'm at. Hard stuff getters on my timeline. But
get it together. All right. We'll see y'all later. No, we'll see y'all later. Bye-bye. Bye. Bye-bye.